A kitchen, late evening. Someone is pacing between the stove and the counter, explaining out loud in full sentences why a particular decision at work was wrong. There is no one else in the room. The cat does not count. Midway through a perfectly structured argument, the door opens. A roommate, a partner, a child who was supposed to be asleep. The voice stops, the eyes drop, and for a second the person standing there feels something familiar. The sharp, irrational sting of being caught doing something embarrassing. Except here is the thing. The embarrassment is pointed in the wrong direction. Because what that brain was doing in that kitchen, talking to itself, out loud, with nobody listening, is one of the most sophisticated cognitive operations a human nervous system can run. Nearly a century ago, a Soviet psychologist named Lev Vygotsky noticed something about children that would take decades to fully understand. Children narrate everything. They play and speak simultaneously. Now I take the red block, now I build the tower, now it falls. Vygotsky called this egocentric speech, and the conventional assumption was that children outgrow it as they mature. They do not. The speech goes underground. It becomes inner dialogue, the voice in your head that plans, evaluates, and directs. But for a significant number of adults, the speech does not stay underground. It surfaces, and when it does, something measurable happens. The brain activates working memory more effectively when thoughts are spoken aloud than when they remain silent. Sound acts as a physical anchor. Daniel Kahneman, in Thinking, Fast and Slow, describes how expensive conscious cognitive control is, how much energy it costs the prefrontal cortex to hold multiple variables in place. Speaking a thought out loud offloads part of that cost. It turns an internal juggling act into an external acoustic signal that the brain can process with less effort. People who talk to themselves are not confused. They are running a focus protocol that silent thinkers do not have access to. The mechanism goes further than focus. Psychologist Ethan Kross, in his book Chatter, describes a phenomenon called illism, the habit of referring to yourself in the third person. When someone under stress says out loud, "Okay, calm down, think about this clearly," and uses their own name instead of I, something shifts in the prefrontal cortex. Kross demonstrated through brain imaging studies that distant self-talk reduces amygdala activation. It creates a gap between the person and the emotion. Not suppression, the emotion is still felt, but perspective. The brain treats the problem as if it belongs to someone else, which unlocks the same analytical clarity that people bring to other people's problems but rarely to their own. Think about how easy it is to give advice to a friend and how impossibly hard it is to follow that same advice yourself. Distanced self-talk exploits exactly that asymmetry. By shifting from first person to third, the brain accesses the advisor role, the one that sees clearly because it is not drowning in the emotion. Self-talk, in this context, functions as a real-time emotional regulation tool. The person is not falling apart. They are running an internal coaching session, acknowledging the fear, structuring the chaos, locating the exit. The brain is using language as a decompression mechanism before the cortisol reaches a level that impairs decision-making. It is, in a very literal sense, the cheapest and fastest therapy available, conducted by the one person who knows the full history of the patient. There is also a perceptual effect that most people do not expect. Researchers Gary Lupian and Daniel Swingley ran an experiment in 2012 that produced a surprisingly clear result. Participants who said the name of an object out loud, milk, keys, glasses, found that object significantly faster than participants who searched in silence. The mechanism, the acoustic signal, primes the visual system. The brain couples the sound of the word with the stored image, sharpening the perceptual filter. The eyes literally become more efficient at scanning when the mouth is providing a target label. People who mutter while searching in a grocery store, in a parking lot, in their own apartment are not absent-minded. Their brain has activated what is essentially an internal search engine. The voice is the query. The visual cortex is the results page. Then there is the social layer, conducting a full conversation with someone who is not in the room, rehearsing what to say to a boss, anticipating how a friend will react, arguing a point that has not been made yet, sounds like a sign of isolation. Neuroscience says the opposite. Oliver Sacks, in his studies of neurological function, described how the brain builds internal models of other people, complete simulations that include likely responses, emotional tendencies, and rhetorical patterns. People who talk through hypothetical conversations out loud tend to have a highly developed theory of mind, the capacity to simulate the perspectives, intentions, and emotional reactions of others. The rehearsal is not obsession, it is architecture. The brain is constructing a social model, testing variables, optimizing the approach before the interaction happens. Many of the most effective communicators in history were known to practice their dialogues alone. Not in front of a mirror for vanity, in solitude out loud iterating the argument until the structure held under pressure. This is not the behavior of someone who cannot handle people. It is the behavior of someone whose brain treats social encounters as complex systems worth preparing for. The strange part is that the people who rehearse most carefully are often the ones who appear most natural in the actual conversation, precisely because the preparation happened off stage. And underneath all of this sits metacognition, the brain thinking about its own thinking. When a thought stays silent, it can remain vague, contradictory, half-formed. It drifts. It repeats without being examined. The moment it becomes speech, it passes through a filter. Language requires structure. A sentence needs a subject, a direction, a logical sequence. Speaking a thought forces the brain to formalize it, and in that formalization, errors become audible. An idea that seemed convincing in the fog of inner monologue suddenly sounds wrong when spoken into the room. The correction happens in real time, without deliberate effort. People who regularly talk to themselves are running a quality check on their own cognition. They are not passively receiving their thoughts. They are auditing them, and the audit happens faster through speech than through silence. The last piece is the one that connects all the others. There is a network in the brain called the default mode network, the system that activates when there is no external task demanding attention. It is the network that runs during daydreaming, during walks with no destination, during the quiet moments between tasks. In highly creative individuals, this network tends to be more active, generating connections between ideas, running simulations, projecting into the future, linking concepts that do not obviously belong together. When that activity reaches a certain density, the pressure needs an outlet. Language becomes the channel. Albert Einstein was known to mutter mathematical relationships and half-formed ideas to himself while walking the streets of Princeton. He later described this as a way of bringing abstract shapes and relationships into the acoustic world, making the invisible tangible by giving it sound. The spoken word in this context is not a sign of disorder. It is a bridge between abstraction and reality, the point where an idea that exists only as a neural pattern gets translated into something physical, something audible, something the brain can examine from the outside. The creative process does not end with the thought. It ends when the thought becomes material. And for many people, speech is the fastest path from one to the other. Not a bug in the system, a feature of a processor that generates more signal than silence can hold. The stigma around self-talk is one of those social rules that survives on inertia, not on evidence. Somewhere along the way, the culture decided that speaking to yourself is a sign that something has gone wrong, that the inner world has leaked out, that the boundary between private thought and public behavior has cracked. The evidence, from Vygotsky to Cross to Lupien, points in a consistent and opposite direction. The brain that talks to itself is a brain that is focusing harder, regulating emotion more effectively, searching more precisely, modeling social reality more thoroughly, auditing its own logic, and bridging the gap between internal creativity and external expression. That is not a malfunction. That is a system running at capacity and using every available channel to manage the load. The next time it happens, the muttering in the kitchen, the pep talk in the car, the full rehearsal of a conversation that has not happened yet, there is no reason to stop. The brain knows what it is doing. It just needs the voice to do it. On Friday, people who opt out of watching football. The neurochemistry of mass rituals and what it means when your reward system declines the invitation. That one is a issue lighter, but the mechanism is just as real.